Hey everyone, today we're going to read a short story called The Cage. And as we read the story, we're going to stop periodically and you are going to make predictions about the story on the predictions worksheet. So make sure you have your predictions worksheet open on your iPad next to you while we read/listen to the story. So the story is called The Cage. So before we even start reading the story, we're going to have you stop. And I want you to make your first prediction on the predictions worksheet, just based on the title of the story, The Cage. So now that you've made your first prediction, let's read a little bit of the story. There was no way out. The walls of his cell were built of thick cement block. The huge door was made of steel. The floor and ceiling were made of concrete, and there was no windows. The only light came from a light bulb that was covered by a metal shield. So stop right here, pause the video, and make prediction number 2 on your predictions worksheet. Let's keep going. There was no way out, or so it seemed. He had volunteered to be part of a scientific experiment and had been put in the cell to test the cleverness of the human mind. The cell was empty and he was not allowed to take anything into it, but he had been told that there was one way to escape from the cell, and he had 3 hours to find it. He began with the door. It stood before him, huge and gray. The 3 large hinges on the door were riveted into the wall and could not be removed. The door itself seemed too big for the small cell, and for a minute he wondered if it had been put up first and the rest of the cell built around it. So pause the video here, stop, and make prediction number 3 on your predictions worksheet. Finally, he turned away from the door and looked around. He tried pushing against the cement blocks to see if any of them were loose. He searched the floor for a trap door. Then he glanced up at the ceiling, the shield around the light bulb. His mind raced. The metal shield could be used as a tool, the tool he needed. He had found the way to escape. So pause the video here, stop, and make prediction number 4. He moved under the shield and looked closely at it. One good strong pull would free it, he decided. He reached up, grabbed hold of it, and pulled, but the shield stayed attached to the ceiling. He grabbed the shield again, twisting it as he pulled. He felt it rip free, and he fell to the floor, clutching his treasure. The shield was shaped like a cone and had been fastened to the ceiling by 3 long metal prongs. These prongs were sharp, but they were definitely not strong enough to cut through the steel or concrete or cement. He felt a hopelessness creep over him. He could find no use for the shield as a tool. The shield was not what he needed to get out. Then he had a brilliant idea. True, the metal prongs of the shield could not cut through the steel door, the concrete floor, or the cement blocks in the wall, but the prongs might be strong enough to dig out the mortar that held the cement blocks in place. He pulled off one of the prongs and scraped hard at the mortar. The mortar crumbled into powder. His idea worked. If he removed enough mortar, he could loosen a couple of the cement blocks, then push them out and escape. So pause the video here and make prediction number 5 on your worksheet. He selected 2 blocks near the door and set to work. The prong dug into the mortar and sent it flying out in a steady stream. The prong was just what he had needed. Now he was sure he would escape, but his hand made a sudden careless twist, and the metal prong broke into 2 useless pieces. At first, a wave of anger stunned him. Then he remembered that the shield had 2 more prongs. He pulled off another prong and went back to work. He decided he must be more careful. Nothing must go wrong. There was still plenty of time left. Soon he had chipped out 4 inches of mortar, but the jagged edges of the cement blocks had torn the skin off his knuckles. His hands were bleeding from a dozen burning cuts. His back and shoulders were hurt from the strain of working in one position. The mortar dust blew into his eyes and down his throat. The work dragged on slower and slower. Suddenly, the second prong broke. For a minute, he welcomed the excuse to stop working, but the thought of failure sent him back into action. He pulled off the third and last prong and went to work again. He was a man who did not like to lose. He had to win. At last, he broke through. He had dug out enough mortar so that he could see light between the cement blocks. Stop here and make a prediction number 6 on your worksheet. With a spurt of energy, he chipped away at the rest of the mortar. Of course there was a way out. He had found it, hadn't he? He had proved that a clever mind could solve any problem. That's how he had done it, with his own cleverness. At that instant, the third prong snapped in his hand. He stared at the useless pieces, then in a blind rage he slammed his fist against the wall. Behind him, the door of the cell opened slowly. His time had run out. His part of the experiment was over. He was not allowed to talk about the experiment or his plan of escape. However, he was sure that he could have escaped, and he was convinced that he almost had. So stop here, make prediction number 7 on your worksheet. Actually, he had not even come close. The shield had been put around the light bulb only as a shade for the light. The metal prongs were not meant to be used as a tool. The man had been clever, but he let his cleverness sidetrack him. If he had not been so quick to use the shield as a tool, if he had not spent all of his time chipping out the mortar, and if he had not stopped searching the cell, he might have found the real way out. He might have discovered that he could have left the cell as easily as he had entered, for the huge door had never been locked. So that's it for the story. Now you're going to go and answer the reading questions for the short story, The Cage.